You know, I've been messing around with cameras and YouTube for a while, but never really had any kind of focus other than just having fun while writing. Thought I would give it storytelling a chance and about what story I could tell that might be of interest to some people. And I realize being diabetic might be the story. I'm 50 years old. I've known about my diabetes since January 2021. So a little over 2 years. And of course, that's when I learned about it. I was diabetic before that. My diabetes is type 2. I'm not insulin dependent right now. Thank God. And I do take medication. I am under a doctor's care, monitoring, keeping things figured out as best we can. We have not figured everything out. So that's the theme, if you will. What have I realized? What have I learned about being diabetic and trying to maintain an active lifestyle, trying to maintain all the mountain biking in my life that I love, just trying to be fit, exercising, occasionally hiking, although I'm not consistent with that. And I love kayaking, although I hardly ever get to do it. And primarily, the activities I like are endurance activities, long duration. And so I thought I would share some of my experiences, some of my questions, some of my frustrations, because it isn't all pretty. If you have diabetes, you know. And on top of that, of course, I'm not a doctor of any kind. I'm not a medical expert of any kind. I'm not trying to tell you what you should do. I'm not trying to give you advice in any way. I thought I would just tell a story, maybe over just a few videos. Maybe it grows into something. I don't know. I also want to have fun with it. Let's see what happens. Maybe there's a community of weekend warrior type athletes like me. I call myself an athlete in the very loosest, most generous sense of the term. But others with diabetes, others with similar or related concerns, and what their experiences are like. What are your experiences like? And it doesn't matter if you're young or old, and it doesn't matter what your favorite activity is. Mine is mountain biking, but if you're any kind of athlete, if you're involved in any kind of activity that is, you might say, primarily focused on endurance versus very short duration, high intensity, then I'm sure you've had to go through some learning, so possibly some, educating yourself about what's smart, what's dumb, listening to your doctor, realizing your doctor probably wasn't in a position to be able to tell you everything that you would need to know. And so you learn a lot of details as you go. And that's the story I thought I'd give a shot at telling. And along the way, one of the ways I want to have fun at it is I want to get better at telling a story. I may not be very good at it, and if I can, I'd like to get better. That's another goal of mine, just to get better at that. This particular ride for me is supposed to be an easy one, not that long. But still, what most people might consider an endurance activity. I'm estimating between 1 and 2 hours. I don't exactly know. There's a 10-mile lap out here that I like. It takes me a little over an hour and a half. So maybe this ride, if I get 2 laps, will get up to around 3 hours. And that is an easy ride for me under most conditions. I'm not fast, but that duration between 1 and 3 hours, no matter what you're doing, that's an endurance activity. So maybe it's a good ride to try telling a little bit of story. So what kind of story can I tell about my journey discovering and learning to deal with diabetes? Looking back, my big symptoms began roughly 2019, roughly 4 years ago. A couple years before they got bad enough that I went to go get tested for it. Occasionally there would be a big ride. 2 or 3 hours into it, I'd have plenty of food and water, but I would not be recovering. I would be degrading as time went on the ride. At the time, I was thinking, I'm low on energy. I need more food, more carbohydrates, more calories. And so I would consume more during the ride, during a rest. And the more I consumed, the worse I felt. My assessment of the situation, assessment of my condition was completely wrong. Looking back, I now know my blood sugar at that moment was really high, and I could feel its effects. I didn't know that was the cause, exacerbating it by consuming more carbs, thinking I needed to recover and refuel, and just the opposite was going on. So the reason I was feeling miserable at that moment on the ride, and this happened more than once actually, was my blood sugar was extremely high, and I was feeling oddly ill, oddly like I was run down, and my strength and endurance were deteriorating at that moment on the rides instead of getting better as I consumed more calories, particularly carbs. Keep in mind, this was before I knew. This was a year or two before I knew. So at the time, I didn't understand it. Sometime a year later, I noticed other symptoms, the classic symptoms of what you call adult onset diabetes, right? I started to lose weight, not rapidly, but without trying to, I was losing weight. But then I was noticing the thirst, that unquenchable thirst, that uncomfortable thirst. It was distracting all the time, no matter how much water I would drink. That was 2020, losing weight, thirsty all the time. Went to see my doctor. Results came back January 2021. My fasting blood sugar was excessively high. My A1C was excessively high. And so I've had just a little over 2 years of that knowledge to try to make adjustments, change things. So what have I done? Well, I have essentially stopped consuming alcohol altogether. Across the past 2 years or so, I might have had an entire 12-pack of beer. And I'm actually okay. I'm just fine, as a matter of fact. That's something I can talk more about some other time as well. What else have I done? What other changes have I made? But one of the conscious changes I made to my eating routine was not to skip breakfast, but to dramatically reduce or eliminate carbs at breakfast. I also switched up my snacking, the choices I made for snacks. A can of Pringles, that's a single serving. That's awesome. Well, of course, I've had to curtail that. I do still eat carbs for the most part during lunch and dinner. I don't drink juice, hardly ever. I don't drink soda. I never was a big soda drinker. So my liquid calorie intake was easy to manage. Just had to cut the alcohol. So if you are diabetic as an adult, what have your experiences been like? What have you managed to change in a positive way? Even if it's not fixing anything or curing anything, of course, it should be helping. So what helps you? one of my plans to tell a story here is to talk about food and calorie intake during long rides. And I believe you can equate that to long events of any kind of activity. Right now, today, I'm just drinking water. I'm not gonna be out here very long. But that's been a new learning process as well. Refiguring what I have to do the morning of a ride and during a ride and even post-ride. So that's another story I would like to tell here. Maybe I should talk a little bit about what I mean by a weekend warrior endurance athlete. Air quotes. I ride typically once on a weekend, and on a good week I'll get a short midweek ride. And so how is it endurance related? Well, a short ride is going to be between an hour and a half. Just having fun. Rides on the weekends typically will be 20 miles or more, between 3,000 and 5,000 feet of elevation gain. What would that take me? So I could have between 3 and 6 hours of moving time. It's kind of typical. That's the typical window. And of course, that's moving time. Elapsed time would be much more. So just to give you some idea of what I mean by a weekend warrior endurance athlete. And really, I'm just a guy. Nothing special about me. Just trying to figure it out and have some fun. So if you yourself are active, good on you. Hiking, I get it. Kayaking, I get it. I used to be a runner. I actually occasionally miss it. I don't run anymore. I enjoy swimming, but I hardly ever get to do it. So good on you if you're active, especially if you're diabetic. Pretty awesome up here today. So over there is Mount Baldy, highest point in LA County. Turning north and east. I don't know if one of those is San Gorgonio. I don't know if it's visible from here, to be honest. Then a little further rotating, that is San Jacinto, off in the distance. Looking south, Zanja Peak right in front of me. Over here, looking southwest toward Orange County, you can just see Santiago and Majestica Peaks, Saddleback, highest point in Orange County. Pretty neat up here right now. So what else is part of my story? I have to take medications for the blood sugar, for reducing the blood sugar. And they're working, I would say, I better concentrate. They're working very well so far. I still have to control my diet. I think that's never going to change, but that's okay. I'm not on insulin, thankfully. I hope I never have to go on insulin, but I would like to try to share other aspects of my journey of being a diabetic and trying to maintain an active lifestyle and with endurance activities. And so I've got some things planned that I'd like to try to accomplish regarding sharing my story. For example, I'd like to share what I do to eat breakfast before a ride versus, or before a big ride, before a long ride, versus doing so before a short ride or even on a non-ride day, because I am doing things differently. Oh, that's a low branch. I have been experimenting and had to experiment a lot to try to figure out what's going to work best during the ride, what kind of calories, in what form, how many, how often, during the ride. I'd like to, that's one where I really want to hear from others who have experience with this. Because I have not figured all of that out yet, despite trying for 2 years plus. I've learned some things, but I don't have it dialed in. And if you think you do, please share. Please let me know. And there are other things I want to share, other parts of the story I want to try to tell. And as I go, I'm gonna try to become a better storyteller. And I don't know if I'll ever be any good at telling story, but sharing it in an interesting way, but I hope to. Maybe I can contribute something. Maybe all I can offer is just to put it out there that if you're someone with diabetes and trying to figure things out, that you're not alone. And if you are someone trying to figure things out, even if you don't have diabetes, you're not alone. But if you're struggling, then that's actually, in a way, a good sign. To struggle isn't bad. To struggle means you're fighting, you're wrestling with it, trying to get a grip on it, trying to understand it, trying to manage, and trying to move forward with your life, with whatever it is going on that you have going on. So as far as telling a story, if you've got a bit of story as well, I'm curious to hear it. I'm curious to hear how you might be dealing with the things you might be dealing with, and I'll try to share some more story and get really, try to improve at storytelling. Let me know what your questions are. Let me know what you've experienced and what you've learned, and share a little bit of your story. My name is Patrick, and I'm riding diabetic.